F1.
Red flag. Red flag's to slow down.
What? The checkered flag is waiting.
I can see our Checkered Flag podcast being quite spicy.
Five Live's Checkered Flag podcast.
Hello, I'm Rosanna Tennant. We have just watched a qualifying session in the Principality of Monaco that kept us all on the edge of our seats right to the very last second. Max Verstappen took pole position in the Principality of Monaco. All eyes were on him as he did his best to pip Fernando Alonso to the post. They will line up alongside each other on the front row tomorrow. Joining me to talk through the qualifying session is former Formula One driver Jolyon Palmer. Jolyon, all eyes were on Max Verstappen, and boy did he deliver when he needed to.
He did, yeah, right at the end. He was the last car to come across the line, and so many other drivers had done brilliant laps. Alonso was on provisional pole, Leclerc was there in the Ferrari, Ocon had done some sort of sensational lap in the Alpine, and it looked like Alonso was going to take pole, but Verstappen came through and put in a majestic final sector, I had to say, to claw back 2/10 plus that he was down on Alonso, put it together and broke so many hearts by taking pole position. The Red Bull man, championship leader, is back on pole in Monaco, but that doesn't tell most of the story of the session.
Absolutely not. No, it was a champion's drive this afternoon. Also joining me is Harry Benjamin. Harry, it wasn't the cleanest of laps, though, from Max Verstappen. Almost, you could say, a little scrappy.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, we got so excited in the commentary box on our feet because it really looked like Alonso might well get his first pole position in over a decade, but Verstappen found it all in that final sector, really. Alonso had the fastest Sector 1 and Sector 2 times and set that lap time earlier on. So Alonso had it in the bag, under control, but it just goes to show once again, we can get our hopes up, but you never, ever discount Max Verstappen. There's something within that man who he can just find that little bit of extra and trump the field. But with Alonso in second on the front row, I think it could be tasty going down into turn one.
It will. I know it will be tasty. 142 metres from P1 to that first corner, and all eyes are going to be on those two drivers, two world champions, two-time world champions, both of them. Let's hear from Max Verstappen then, your pole sitter for tomorrow's Monaco Grand Prix.
Yeah, I mean, I think my outlet was a little bit compromised on that final run. It was a bit too slow with the traffic. That's why maybe my Sector 1 and maybe the beginning of Sector 2 wasn't amazing. But that's why also I risked it all in the last sector, and luckily it still worked out.
And how do you get a clean start here when you're lining up alongside Fernando Alonso?
I mean, we're on the inside, the better line normally. I think we have improved our starts a bit, so we just need to have a decent start. And then just look after our car, look after the tyres and do our normal strategy. Max
Verstappen very much in the pound seats then for tomorrow's Grand Prix, because Jolyon Palmer, really 99% of the job is done. Qualifying is just so important around this track.
It is the biggest part of the Monaco weekend, is putting it together. And when it's so close as it was today, with different cars in the mix as well, I mean, the fine margins are just critical, and Max will know that he's done a huge part of the job today. And not only that, but we'll get onto it, I'm sure, in a bit, but Sergio Perez is right at the back of the field as well, his championship rival and teammate. So it's a huge job that Verstappen's done, clinching that pole position today. And again, it was all in that final sector, coming through the second part of the swimming pool, which is, I think, the easiest corner to crash on the circuit. He almost was brushing the walls. It looked like perfection coming through there, and then into Raskas, and he made up a good amount of time on Alonso there and got the job done. I can't remember too many pole sitters losing the lead off the line. Whilst I'm quite excited about the prospect of Alonso on the front row tomorrow, he's a good starter. He's already been saying that Verstappen's a bit hit and miss with the starts and trying to get in his head. I honestly can't remember a time where the pole sitter was beaten off the line in Formula One.
Neither can I, off the top of my head, but maybe there's a small chance, a whisper of some mixed conditions tomorrow, which might well throw some spanners into the works. But Alonso will know that qualifying is obviously more, 90% of the job done. Turn 1 is really his only chance, or if he can force Verstappen into a mistake. But seeing Verstappen and Alonso go toe-to-toe at the top end of the grid around these tight street circuits, I think is still going to be a really exciting prospect to watch, because that Aston Martin has looked fast from the get-go. Verstappen hasn't.
I do feel like there's something in it this weekend as well. It just felt like it was a really dramatic qualifying session. You had Perez crashing right at the start. you had Williams and AlphaTauri 1 minute being right at the top. Sainz and Hamilton were almost out in Q1. The whole order was topsy-turvy.
Yuki Tsunoda was up there at one point in Q1.
It was breathless the whole way through. And I just feel like the scene is set for quite... I just feel something in me feels like we're not going to get a plain, boring Monaco race. And if you're going to put someone on the front row to disturb Max Verstappen tomorrow, I do think it is the tough racer, fast starter Fernando Alonso that would just love to meddle with anyone if he possibly can. So we've got a recipe still for tomorrow.
We definitely have. We've got an absolute classic. It could be a vintage race. Tomorrow afternoon's Monaco Grand Prix will be led away by Max Verstappen, who is your pole sitter for the 2023 Monaco Grand Prix. And of course, Max Verstappen's teammate, Jolien, you mentioned, nowhere to be seen because, of course, he crashed in the first part of qualifying, a time when he really didn't need to be pushing the envelope. So I just had a quick chat with him. He sounded very disgruntled, as you'd imagine. In fact, let's hear from him.
Yeah, I did a mistake. I just got the rear end out of shape quite late into the corner, so I had nowhere to go, and I end up hitting the barrier, which is a big shame for me.
And what is possible tomorrow? This pace is so hard to overtake, and yet you do have such a strong car.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really tricky tomorrow to make some progress, so we will try everything.
So Checo Perez finds himself in a very tricky situation tomorrow, Jolien Palmer, and that crash coming in so early during qualifying, he didn't need to be pushing hard, did he?
Not that hard. It's catastrophic, I fear, for Perez's championship chase, I'm afraid to say, for a driver that has been good so far this year. He's won a couple of Grand Prix and has been pretty close with Max in the only team that's capable of fighting for a win. But he's had a second qualifying crash in the first 6 qualifyings. In Melbourne, he managed to recover to 5th. He won't do that here. It's just not possible to come from the back of the field and get maybe, I mean, the dream would be to get maybe a point for Perez, but it's all going to be a little consolation, I think. And it's a really, really poor error for a driver that just needed to get the top 15, needed to bed in and build up the confidence. Pushed too hard too soon, hit the wall. And with Verstappen on pole, if Max has a clean race and wins, or even worst case gets a podium, the championship is gone, I think, for Perez with this, I'm afraid.
And he is now no longer king of the streets, would you say?
Villain of the streets. No, come on. He's been tremendous in his whole career on the streets. Every race that he's won has been on a street circuit. He won here last year. In my mind, he is still a street circuit specialist. The thing with the streets is you can crash on any lap, on any corner, and that's what he did. And he's got championship pressures as well this season. Maybe he did last year, and he crashed last year, of course, as well. But very different circumstances. Still king of the streets, but he ain't coming back tomorrow.
Catastrophic, though, Palmer? I mean, obviously it's a massive hit, and it really is only just between Verstappen and Perez, 14 points, the gap between them coming into this weekend. It's only round 6. It's still early on in the season. We can't predict. It could all go terribly wrong. I feel like catastrophic is not... It's not quite the right word. Yeah,
Do you really believe that?
I'm trying to believe that because I just want this championship challenge to be a little bit better than it actually is, because I think Perez has actually been, all in all, much better than we expected. A slight cut above than certainly his first year with Red Bull. But, you know, we go to Spain after this, which again could be anybody's track as well.
Do you really believe that?
Yeah, could be. Well, not anybody's. Anybody out of Red Bull and Perez.
Let's just do a little bit of real talk here.
All right.
Perez has a huge fan base, and he's a very popular driver. Harry Benjamin is the lead supporter. Yeah, and you're really trying to just drum up the support. But in reality, he is not as good a Formula One driver as Max Verstappen.
Well, no.
And he's not. And that's not, to be harsh on him.
We're
comparing Verstappen to anyone. And, they're not going to be looking favourably. Maybe a Hamilton's, maybe an Alonso, maybe. But he is going to cement himself as legend status, is Max. And Checo isn't. He's in his later years in Formula One. He's been around more than a decade. And we know what he can do. And on his day, he's very good. But putting a championship bid together against someone as good as Max has proven to be for so many years, it takes everything. And Nico Rosberg did it. And in my opinion, Nico Rosberg wasn't as good as Lewis when they were teammates, but he was pretty close. He was admirably close. He put together an almost unblemished season to just nick it from Lewis, with Lewis having a lot of bad luck. You cannot afford to crash at the start of Q1 on 2 occasions in the first 6 races, but particularly in Monaco, when this would be earmarked as a Perez track. He won it last year. He's been on the podium in inferior cars in this circuit as well, in Force Indias. So he had to be winning on his favourite tracks, and he's not going to win. He might get nothing, and his teammate will win. 40 points to Verstappen if that happens at the end of the weekend. He's not coming back. So, well, yeah, catastrophic. Catastrophic is the crux of it, I'm afraid, Harry.
Well, let's hope Checo isn't listening to this podcast, because he needs to feel optimistic heading into tomorrow's race.
I'll have a word with him later.
I hope he is, and the best case is that he can prove me wrong, and
yes.
I'll happily be wrong about it, and he can bring us all a championship fight to the end, and Harry will be cheering the whole way.
Where do you think he can actually get to tomorrow?
If he gets a point, I think might be quite impressed. It'll depend on the strategy, and if he can somehow work his way into some clear space, then he can come back through. And I've seen it before. Fernando Alonso once had to miss qualifying and came back through. Max Verstappen had to miss qualifying and came back through to get points. Problem is, if you pit early and you're Perez from the back, let's deep dive. You pit early from the back of the field, you're going to get clear space. You're going to pit into 20 seconds of space, and that'll be fine. All he then needs is Sargent to cover him off on the next lap in the Williams, and his race is done. Everyone will cover him off, no more pit stops to make, and you're stuffed. You have to then do all the overtaking on track. So the only option for Perez, as I'm sitting here now, is to go as long as you possibly can, and then hope that someone further ahead bunches up the whole field and there's no field spread. Because as soon as the field spreads, if Sargent loses 10 seconds to Bottas, who loses 5 seconds to Albon, then everyone in the top 10 can pit and come out ahead of Perez anyway if he goes long. So the only hope that he has in this race, strategy-wise, is to go long and hope that everyone trundles around together, they all pit at the same time to cover each other off, about lap 20 or 30, go to the end, and then Perez can get track position, and if he's very lucky, get a safety car late on and emerge in contention. That's the only way that he can come through. If he does, maybe some minor points. That's as bad as the situation is for him.
Let's hope Checo Perez, a.k.a. the tyre whisperer, is polishing the hard tyres as we speak. So Checo will start from the back of the grid. Meanwhile, up at the sharp end alongside Max Verstappen, our pole sitter, it is Fernando Alonso. And I think so many people, especially here down in the paddock where I was during qualifying, thought he had it in the bag. And he'd been talking a good game going into this weekend, hadn't he? Did you believe the hype, Jolien Palmer? I don't think you did, did you? You went for Charles Leclerc, didn't you?
I'll give you credit that you believed the hype. And I went Leclerc, you went Alonso, and he was so close to getting it as well. Great call, Rosanna. Great call.
Do you know, I was shouting to our producer going, oh my goodness, he's going to do it and I'm going to be right. And then he wasn't. So never mind. It was close, wasn't it? But that's Monaco, and that is why I think we're loving the resurgence of Fernando Alonso now with the Aston Martin team. So let's hear from Fernando Alonso, buoyed up with his front row start for tomorrow's Monaco Grand Prix.
I think it was very exciting from the outside, not so much from the inside. I think it was less enjoyable to drive the car at these limits, because you go over the limit in few places. But as we always said, Monaco is all about Saturday, so it was the day to push the car to the maximum. And I think, as I said, as a team we should be happy with the first row of the grid, but we will try again tomorrow. You never know.
You said you were a candidate for pole. Are you a candidate for a win?
I think so. I think the top three always are a candidate for a win here. Also, the weather is a little bit unstable for tomorrow, so we have to be focused, see the checkered flag, and don't make any mistake.
So Fernando Alonso will start from P2 on the grid. It's a short run to turn one. Max Verstappen needs a clean start, but how do you make a clean start when you have Fernando Alonso alongside you?
Blank him out. You've got to just concentrate on the lights and your own procedure. And like I said, I cannot remember the pole sitter losing the lead off the line in Formula One in Monaco. I'm sure someone's thinking that they've got an obvious example that I'm missing, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. So Verstappen's got to just know that, and know that if he gets the start right, he can command turn one. He'll be on the inside anyway, even if Alonso gets a better launch. Verstappen is unlikely to just purely drive past him on the outside. So Verstappen will have the inside, and then he's got to get his elbows out and usher Alonso towards a wall or crash. So it's going to be very difficult for Fernando, but with Fernando, you never say never.
There could be wet weather, though. That's you. I mean, I know, Palmer, you're not on this hype at all, but it's been there for the last week in the forecast, and it's still there tomorrow. 80% chance of rain around the start of the race. That could really throw a spanner into the works if it's a wet start. That surely creates a bit more, even more of an even playing field for the starters.
No, I don't think it's going to be wet though.
Fake news. It's boiling hot.
It's fake news.
I'm saying, Rosanna, get the umbrella. Get it ready. I'm telling you now.
You need it for the shade. Blue skies.
I'm just looking at the weather forecast again. I mean, I only need to look up at the blue sky above me and look down at the sweat patches under my arms. But yes, no, okay, 10% right, 10%.
Well,
okay,
you
10% chance
stand
at
over
2.
the grid, and with those sweat, maybe you'll have a bit of moisture, and it will be an unpredictable start.
Oh, how nasty. How nasty. Look, I don't think so. I think we might have had all the rain we're going to get this weekend, and that was on Thursday at lunchtime, where it did throw it down. But it's been dry and it's been warm, and I just don't even know whether the rain would help things at this point for Fernando Alonso.
Okay, well, if it's a wet race, then it's open. Not only is the start more unpredictable, but the strategy is also more unpredictable, as we saw last year. And it was a showcase in how to win or lose a Grand Prix with the rain. And it wasn't even through the start, it wasn't even through driver error, but it was on the pit wall. And there are still things that can go wrong. Pit stops that have gone wrong for Daniel Ricciardo in the past. Safety car timings can change this race as well. We've seen that with Hamilton and Rosberg back in the day. And so there are things that can go wrong. It's not an absolute home banker, this, for Verstappen. But obviously, on track, he'll know that if he gets into the lead at the first corner, which he should do with his track position, it's a narrower run as well, and it's arcing to the right, so he's got even less distance than usual. Then he should control it, and he'll know that then it's up to the team and a little bit of fate to deny him.
And interesting enough, both Max and Fernando are out there alone. Their teammates are so far behind. Lance Stroll down in P14, and as we've spoken about, Sergio Perez in P20. So there's not even a sort of team effort that could help those two right at the front. It's all down to them.
I don't know what happened with Stroll, really. He just wasn't really quite on the pace, particularly with Alonso. He was fast in FP3, though, but in the end, further back, as you say, and Albon was also looking quite quickly.
I think he was struggling with his tyre prep, Lance Stroll, and just didn't really feel good in the car, whereas, obviously, his teammate, it must be a different car.
Well, I mean, Alonso's had the edge on him right from the start, hasn't he? But then again, Alonso has the edge on every teammate he comes across. But
this circuit, it exaggerates differences between teammates as well. It's such a driver's track, and Alonso is quicker than Stroll. He's been ahead all season, but Stroll has been solid in the second Aston Martin. There's two things in play. Firstly, the field spread is so tight that if Stroll's a couple of tenths away from Alonso, then it could be the difference between Fernando going through into Q3 and Lance going out. Now, it was a little bit more than that today, and so I think it was maybe 4 tenths, half a second difference, which is still not the absolute end of the world around a really difficult circuit. It happens from time to time, but with today's cars, the tight packed field, it's enough for Stroll to end up with, again, a bit of a bleak race on the cards for tomorrow.
And behind Max Verstappen and Fernando Alonso, it's Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, who a lot of people were tipping for a pole position this weekend in front of his home crowd. At the moment, we're still unsure as to whether he's going to get a penalty for impeding Lando Norris. I had a chat with Charles a little earlier on, and he thinks he did everything right.
Well, I explained Lando and the stewards what I did, which was basically the best I could do in the position I found myself under the tunnel. You have no visibility in the mirrors. And as soon as I got the info, I tried to get out of the way. Then obviously the timing is very, very difficult on this track, as you always feel like you are out of place. Let's see what's going to happen. Lando understood my point of view, and now we need to see and wait for the steward's decision.
Did you not get the info quickly enough, do you think?
Sorry?
Do you think you didn't get the information quickly enough?
Again, the situation is always very, very tricky in Monaco, so I feel like we did the best we could.
That was Charles Leclerc, and at the moment we're recording this just after he'd been to the steward, so we're still waiting on a decision. But Jolyon Palmer, what are you expecting the stewards to decide?
I think he was impeding Norris. I mean, he was going slowly in the tunnel on the left-hand side of the track and quite centralish as well, so there wasn't really a lot of space for Lando to get through and keep it pinned. And for Leclerc and Ferrari, I think it's also a sloppy one in Monaco. You've got to have your wits about you and steer clear of traffic. It's not easy because the track's so narrow, but in Q3 there's not many cars to look out for. I think Lando was the only one at that time on a fast lap. This engineer's got to be looking at who's coming up behind and give Charles enough notice, and then Leclerc's got to do the job and get out of the way. Between them, I think that they've fumbled it. I think Norris is impeded, and I would be surprised if Leclerc gets away without. I would expect a 3-place grid penalty for that, which will be obviously so costly for him as well. It would put Ocon into the top 3.
Fantastic work from Ocon, best qualifying of the year so far, and it came out of nowhere really. At one point he was sitting on P1 in the final with the clock timing down. In the end, shuffled down to 4th fastest, could become 3rd, let's see. But Ocon on that Alpine, especially after the bit of the public telling off they got from the CEO Laurent Rossi over coming into Miami last time around, it's good signs for him, and it could be on for a great result, maybe even a podium.
And I'd just say the last couple of qualifyings in Monaco have ended with a red flag, so no one's got their last laps in. Leclerc in 21 got himself pole. Perez last year denied Verstappen a chance to improve. If the same had happened from anyone else, Ocon would have had pole in an Alpine. That's how good the lap was. It was so good, and I don't know where it came from. Alpine have looked okay and the field's been tight, but I didn't think they'd be on the second row, let alone fighting for pole. He has put together the most fantastic lap in that car, 4/10 quicker than Gasly, and in other years there would have been a red flag at the end of a street circuit qualifying. We had it in Baku a couple of races ago as well with Leclerc in it, and Ocon would be on pole in Monaco. It's also a shame. I really felt at the end of that qualifying.
Imagine Ocon and Alonso front row. Imagine.
I felt that there was some magic in the air at the end of that qualifying with everything that was happening, and I thought it was going to happen. And then Verstappen did take a pole position and kept Red Bull's dominance alive. But it was that sort of session where anyone could have done it, and Ocon in the Alpine just rose to the fore.
A great lap, as you say, Jolyon Palmer, from Esteban Ocon, and ahead of Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. A difficult day for Carlos, and ahead of the Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton in P6, just ahead of Pierre Gasly in the other Alpine, and George Russell, P8. He'd had the upper hand on Lewis coming into qualifying, but Lewis managing to pull out a good performance, considering his car was dangling above Monte Carlo just hours before.
And he was always in threat of going out earlier on in qualifying as well. Q1, he was right on the cusp and put in a lap right at the end. Same in Q2. So to finish 6th and actually be over 2/10 clear of Russell was a decent effort from Lewis, with a number of things that could have gone wrong for him, and obviously did go wrong earlier on with that practice crash. But Mercedes, with their upgrades, just still not able to really show what they could do. But as we mentioned before, I don't think they were ever going to properly demonstrate their new car here anyway.
I really didn't understand why they were just going to plough along and bring them anyway to Monaco. I know there's a sense of gathering data going around, but Hamilton found the wall in free practice, and when it's not that much longer until we go to Spain, Barcelona, which is such a testing track, they all know it so well. I just couldn't quite understand why they take the risk of bolting on such big upgrades around Monaco.
Well, I guess because they think the cars are going to go quicker. They've run the numbers. It's been in the pipeline for a long time. They meant to bring it last week, so they've had it all ready to go. They've run the numbers and they say, actually, this is going to be quicker, so we'll just run it. I imagine they've got spares as well, because it's been in the pipeline, because it should have come on last week. They've had enough build time to bring some spares, which they needed after Hamilton hit the wall. So if they can do that, then fine, get it on. Old car or new car, Mercedes don't look very changed here in 6th and 8th. In the end, it's pretty disappointing from them.
I think it's also when you make such a big change, it's difficult to double back, and I think that was the situation they found themselves coming into Monaco with the cancellation of Imola. Let's round out your top 10 then. A great performance from Yuki Tsunoda, finishing inside the top 10. Hopefully he can hang on to a place in the top 10 to take home some points tomorrow. And then Lando Norris in P10, but he may... obviously, he's part of that investigation with himself and Charles Leclerc. He may benefit from that, he may not. And then we're into the second half of the grid, and Oscar Piastri just outside the top 10 behind his teammate in P11. It's such a tricky track for rookies, isn't it, Jolyon Palmer? Are you impressed with Oscar Piastri, or do you think he should have been ahead of Lando?
I think he did pretty well, actually, in the end, to be 11th and nearly in Q3. He hasn't looked very quick through the weekend so far, so to actually be so close to Q3 was good, and he was very, very close with Norris in Q2 in the end. But that's with Norris hitting the wall. And in the end, it was just a misjudgment from Lando coming out of the chicane. And I don't know if it's like quite sloppy in the way, because it's the way that his car moved back onto the racing line. And I don't think it was the momentum or a slide or anything that put him there. But Norris hitting the wall gave Piastri a chance to beat him. Oscar didn't take it, but I still think it's a decent effort from him. 11th, best of the rookies today.
Yeah, round of applause, though, I think, for the Lando Norris side of the garage and the mechanics and engineers, because, as you say, that incident for Norris on his fast lap coming out of the Nouvelle chicane whacked the inside, or the front left, and then through to back the left-hander, then clouted the right-hand wall. So really gave his mechanics a lot of work to do on both sides of the car, and they still were able to get him out to set a lap time, albeit it was 10th and slowest out of the top 10. Just to be out there and getting that car fixed was brilliant. So it's good to see that. And McLaren, 10th and 11th, I think they would have taken that at the start of this weekend, especially after how Miami went for them. A little shout out for Nick De Vries. I thought actually that was a decent lap time. It wasn't stellar compared to Tsunoda, but he'll be just behind Piastri in 12th. So a good run there from De Vries as well.
Yeah, at a time when I think he needs it. And he just finished ahead of Alex Albon in the Williams, P13 for him. Ahead of the second Aston Martin, Lance Stroll, who seemed to be struggling with the car. Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo, P15. They brought upgrades this weekend. Doesn't seem to have helped them out. Then Logan Sargent in P16 ahead of the two Hasses, headed by Kevin Magnussen. A difficult day for both of them. Nico in P18 ahead of Zhou Guan Yu. And of course, Sergio Perez starting tomorrow's race from the back. A shock for the championship. We thought it was going to be between Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. This has definitely put a dampener on things. So guys, how do you see it playing out tomorrow? Can Max Verstappen hold off Fernando Alonso? That is the big question, isn't it?
Alonso's going to slide down the inside, turn one, make his way up the hill, and he's not going to look back. Alonso for the win, 100%, Palmer.
Oh,
this is why I'm not here very often.
Suddenly I'm having flashbacks to Miami, where I think you made a similarly ludicrous prediction.
Yeah.
Look, logic says Verstappen's going to control it. He's driving so well. That last sector was superb. He's in still the best car. This was a great opportunity for someone to beat him. And not only has Perez fluffed his lines today, but Verstappen's held off the Aston Martin, held off the Ferrari, and I see him doing the same tomorrow.
Don't forget about that third of rain. Who are you going for, Rosanna?
Oh, I think it will be Max Verstappen, but I'm interested hearing that you think he's going to go for the inside, Fernando Alonso. I always think he goes round the outside, but who knows? It's difficult to go anywhere but the racing line here in Monaco. I think what is guaranteed, guys, it's going to be a great race.
Well, fingers crossed.
I hope so. I hope so.
Rosanna, if you're guaranteeing me that on Saturday night at Monaco, then if it's even half a great race tomorrow, I will absolutely take it.
Do you know what? I think it will be, because I enjoy seeing Fernando Alonso back at his best in a car that we didn't think was going to be anything, and it could all be rather exciting up at the front end. Who knows?
Well,
Who knows?
I'll tell you what I will give you. If we don't have an overtake tomorrow on track, I'm going to be very disappointed in Perez. In the best car from the back of the field. Now, this is an acid test of can Formula One cars overtake in Monaco. If he is
They were 21 last year. 21.
No, they weren't.
Apparently they
I
were.
think they were.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, they weren't.
Apparently.
Rewatch it, guys. Rewatch it and tell me a single one. If Perez can even pass Zhou on track, I will be really delighted.
Could
and
Perez
whoever's
start
coming
from
up
the
with
pit
those stats, 21 overtakes in Monaco, needs investigating.
Send them to the stewards.
Stewards investigation. When they're done with Leclerc and Norris, come up with the statisticians.
Prioritise that, please, rather than the impeding. Oh, well, guys, thanks so much for helping me review the qualifying session here in the Principality of Monaco. The Monaco Grand Prix gets underway at 2 o'clock and we'll have live commentary on BBC Radio 5 Live. I can't wait for the race tomorrow. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.